Well, a new report from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute says that the government's plan for 12 new Australian-made submarines by 2030 is in disarray. The report finds that Australia could be left without having any submarines at all late next decade. Joining me now from our Canberra studio is the author of the report, the director of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute's Capability Program, Andrew Davies. Andrew Davies, welcome. What's gone wrong with this plan for 12 homemade subs?
Well, I think what's gone wrong is that ambition got a little bit ahead of knowledge when the white paper was framed. Building the submarines that are described in the white paper would mean a brand new submarine design that you can't buy from anywhere else in the world. And if that had been the ambition, then we really needed to get cracking pretty much as the ink was drying on the white paper, and that didn't happen.
So what's the problem now?
Well, the problem that we have now is that the Collins class will reach the end of their scheduled lifetime before the follow-on class is likely to be ready if we go down that particular path. So it means we have one of two options now. We either try to extend the life of the Collins, and I don't think we have enough information to make a sensible decision on that at the moment, or we look elsewhere for our submarines.
So should Australia dump its plan for these 12 homemade submarines and expensive submarines? It's a $36 billion program, isn't it?
I don't think we're at the point of dumping it yet, but I think we're at the point of having to make some hard decisions and having to get a lot more solid body of information behind it than we have at the moment.
So what are some of the options? And I think we've got some shots of some of these international subs that Australia could buy off the shelf for a lot less.
That's right. There are European submarines, conventional submarines. The government has already ruled out a nuclear submarine, and I think there are good reasons to rule that out as a credible alternative. But the European submarines can be bought off the shelf in a relatively short time frame, probably somewhere in the ballpark of 7 years from contract signature to delivery. And they're cheaper, but the downside is that they don't have the range, endurance or payload that the Navy and the government had specified in the white paper. So going down that path would be a compromise on capability, but an improvement in schedule and reliability in all likelihood.
So after having looked at this fairly closely, what conclusion have you come to in relation to whether we should continue down the path of the Collins or maybe buy some of these European subs that don't have the same range?
Well, our major conclusion is that the lifetime of the Collins needs to be understood in a fair bit more detail than it is at the moment, and that should be the very highest priority, a serious study into the viability of the Collins, both in terms of maintainability, but also in terms of its warfighting capability into the 2020s and beyond.
What was this suggestion of going down the path of getting these these new homemade subs, driven by politics rather than good defence policy?
No, I don't think that's a fair assessment of the situation. I think it was actually driven by an assessment of geography and a operational concept that had these submarines operating a very long way from home from Australian bases, rather than looking at possibilities of operating them from other bases further afield. So I think it was a military capability assessment rather than politics that drove it.
Yeah, you mentioned that probably the best option at this stage is an urgent investigation into the capability of the Collins, but hadn't there been so many problems with the Collins that it just doesn't instill any confidence in their capability beyond what we already expect of them?
Well, certainly the Collins is a salutary lesson in some respect. If the decision was taken today to have a rush program to produce a replacement, we'd run the risk of going down that path again. We rushed with the Collins to replace the previous class, and that actually produced a legacy of problems, some of which endure to this day. So the clear lesson is you don't hurry with a submarine design. But in terms of the Collins, there's some cautious room for optimism in the last couple of years. I think we may have reached the low point a couple of years ago with Collins, and things are looking a little bit better today. But a serious independent technical assessment needs to be made.
What is the problem with Australia and submarines? It just seems to be the case that Australia it's been such a drama for the nation over the past two decades. Is it critical that Australia has submarines anyway?
Well, I think submarines offer a lot of capability. I've argued in the past that our Navy could usefully use more submarines, but they need to be available, they need to be reliable. What a submarine does is it gives you a capability far above and beyond the cost of acquiring it, provided you're operating it right, because they disappear. They make it very hard for an adversary to know where they are or where they're going to pop up. So I think there's a lot to be said for submarines, but you need to be careful about how you manage them.
Definitely. OK, Andrew Davies in Canberra from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Joe.